Hi, I'm Randy Wise, curator of the Fremont County Pioneer Museum in Lander, Wyoming. We're standing about a half mile outside of the town of Lander at a location called Fort Thompson or Camp McGraw. It's this big meadow behind me. Very significant part of the Oregon-California Trail history. Primarily in context of the Lander cutoff. The federal government realized that a lot of people were using the Oregon Trail to get west, to California, to Oregon, to Utah, but it was a pretty rough route. They started sending out engineers to engineer and fix that route. Manifest Destiny said we need to connect the continent. So the government sent out surveyors, explorers, engineers to make the route more accessible to the wagon trains that were lining up to head west. One of the engineers they sent out was a fascinating man named Frederick Lander. He's also the namesake of the town of Lander. Frederick Lander was assigned the job of creating a new route that took emigrants north to Fort Hall, Idaho. Many of the immigrants went across Wyoming, across South Pass, and south to Fort Bridger, which was fine if you're going to California or Utah. But if you're going to Oregon or Washington, that's a pretty big travel out of your way. Frederick Lander's job was to create a northerly route that the immigrants could travel. So he came out here in the mid-1850s, did his initial surveying, explored much of the terrain around here, including South Pass. The reason this location is important, Fort Thompson, also called Camp McGraw, because the first guy they sent out was a gentleman named McGraw who was very well connected politically, but not a particularly good engineer or leader or anything really. He just knew the right politicians to get this cushy job doing this. Although how cushy it was, I don't know, because this is rough country. Anyway, he gets replaced by Frederick Lander, who comes out here and starts work. And this is in 1856, 57, 58. The problem with doing road work of any kind, even today at South Pass, is the winters are going to shut you down. There's just no efficient or effective or even safe way to work up there in the dead of winter. The snow and the wind and the temperatures just don't allow it. So Frederick Lander retreated to the Lander Valley here at this spot with his crew during the two winters he was working on the road. The fact that they spent the winter here is why this town is called Lander, because when the town founders were casting about for a name, they were trying to think of somebody that had a connection, but that was significant. But a number of these men that were founders of Lander knew Frederick Lander because in one case, one of them actually was his freighter. A man named Benjamin Franklin Lowe was one of the teamsters that hauled goods back and forth from the Lander Valley to the South Pass area. Knew Frederick Lander very well, really respected him. Benjamin Franklin Lowe goes on to become one of the three primary founders of the town of Lander, and he's the one that throws out the name Frederick Lander. You also have to understand at that point in time, this is the early 1870s, Frederick Lander was a very famous man. He was dead by that point, but he was a significant figure that many Americans would have known. Lander spends a couple of years creating for that time, what probably was a superhighway going north. He built bridges, leveled bluffs, created a pretty well-engineered road for the mid-1850s that took the immigrants to Fort Hall. After that, he goes back to the East Coast and is a power player, so to speak, in Washington circles. He meets a woman that I'd like to talk about too, that eventually becomes his wife. He meets Jean Davenport. Again, a name we don't know today at all, but Jean Davenport was one of the most famous actresses of her time. Performed in London, Paris, New York, Washington, all across the world, and was a renowned Shakespearean actress. She actually started as a child actor in England. She was originally born in England. Her father was a theater manager and got her into the theater. She becomes a accomplished Shakespearean actress and is, again, a worldwide celebrity. She and Frederick Lander meet in Washington, D.C. She's performing at some opera house in Washington, D.C. He's a dashing, well-respected soldier with his uniform. At that point, he's a Colonel Lander. And they fall in love. They go out to California to establish a home out there, and that's where they're going to spend their life together. This is 1860. Well, a year later, the Civil War starts. Frederick Lander is still a military officer. He resigns his commission with the Engineers, which is where he had been assigned, and wants a battlefield commission. He is given command of troops in the Appalachians and serves there fighting early stages of the Civil War. Now, Frederick Lander is famous, to those that know him, for being the only Union general to ever defeat Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson, of course, is the great hero, one of the great heroes of the Confederacy, is fighting in the Appalachians at that point. Frederick Lander, in his engagement with Stonewall Jackson, defeats him. Again, the only Union general to ever beat Stonewall Jackson. Of course, he is wounded in that engagement as well. Pretty severe bullet wound in his leg. Goes back to Washington to rehabilitate. By that point, they've relocated. He and Jean have relocated to Washington, D.C. And that's really about the only time they get to spend any time together. Again, they're married in 1860. The war starts in 1861. Frederick Lander goes off to serve. They really didn't get to spend much time together as a married couple. As soon as he feels he's recovered enough from his wounds, he goes back into the field to command his men. He's still not fully healed, though, and catches a very bad cold, which turns into pneumonia, which eventually kills him. This is, again, in 1861. The belief is that he would have gone on to great fame if he had survived. Again, he was a good soldier, good leader, a lot of good things. Unfortunately, is killed early or dies early in the war. And then, of course, the war grinds on for another 4 years, and we hear Sheridan and Grant and Sherman and all of those Union generals who really surpass Frederick Lander. Certainly significant to Wyoming and Oregon Trail history because of his work on the Oregon Trail. But even in the town of Lander, most people don't know who Frederick Lander was. And here at the museum, we're trying to correct that error. But again, a fascinating man, did an enormous amount of positive work, again, particularly in connection with the Emigrant Trail.